The Arizona sun hung low and cruel above the desert, its burning rays stretching across the dusty plains like molten fingers. Heat shimmered off the earth in trembling waves, blurring the horizon where jagged mesas pierced the sky. Cowboy Jack Dalton, reins loose in his hands, rode his chestnut horse Ranger along the lonely trail that curved around the foothills. It was the kind of day when even rattlesnakes hid in the shade. Jack wiped sweat from his brow and adjusted his hat. He had been riding since dawn, checking his cattle line, and was looking forward to a cold drink and a quiet evening. But fate, he often joked, had a way of tripping him just when things got peaceful. Ranger suddenly halted, muscles tensing beneath the saddle. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured, scanning the ground ahead. That's when he saw her. A figure lay half-hidden near a dry creek bed, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of shallow breaths. Her long dark hair spilled across the sun-baked soil like a fan of black silk. Jack's heart kicked into his ribs. He slid off Ranger and jogged toward her, boots crunching on sun-bleached gravel. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he called. As he knelt beside her, he realized she was an Apache woman, her clothing marked with intricate beadwork, her wrists adorned with small leather ties and polished stones. Sweat beaded her forehead, but there were no visible wounds. Still, her eyes fluttered weakly and pain clouded her expression. "Looks like you've had yourself a rough day," Jack said gently, lifting her head slightly so she could breathe easier. She tried to speak, but only a soft sound escaped her lips, something between a sigh and a whisper in her native tongue. Jack felt a pang of worry. This was unforgiving terrain. No one collapsed in the desert unless they were in real trouble. He gave her a sip from his canteen. She accepted it, her hand trembling as she held it, drinking slowly. "You're all right now." "I got you," Jack assured her. Without wasting another second, he scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and her head came to rest against his chest. He mounted Ranger with practiced ease, settling her carefully in front of him. "Hang on," he whispered as he nudged Ranger into a steady gallop toward his cabin. The desert wind rose behind them, as if carrying secrets Jack had yet to uncover. Jack's cabin sat tucked against a ridge of red stone, a sturdy little structure of pine logs and hand-cut beams. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney as he pushed open the door with his shoulder, carrying the Apache woman, still weak but conscious, inside. The cool shade of the cabin felt like another world, compared to the roasting desert outside. He gently set her down on the cot near the window. "There you go," he said softly. "You're safe now." She watched him with dark, unreadable eyes, her breathing calmer but still shallow. Jack knelt beside her, unsure what to do next. She didn't appear wounded, at least not physically. Her skin wasn't fever-hot and he saw no cuts or bruises. But her exhaustion was real, heavy, almost ritualistic in the way she had collapsed. He wiped his palms on his jeans, suddenly aware of how small the cabin was and how quiet she was. "Name's Jack," he offered, pointing at himself. "Jack Dalton." She blinked, then touched her chest lightly. "Nayeli," she whispered. Her voice was soft but steady, like she had chosen to speak only when the moment mattered. Jack smiled awkwardly. "Well, Nayeli, guess we'll get you some rest." But she didn't rest. Instead, she sat up slowly, reached into a small pouch tied at her hip, and withdrew several objects. Jack leaned back a little, puzzled. From the pouch came feathers, painted beads, and a small carved wooden figure shaped like a deer. She placed them on the floor with deliberate care, forming a half-circle around the hearth. Jack scratched his head. You decorating?" Nayeli didn't answer. Her eyes were focused, intent, as though each object carried meaning he couldn't grasp. She moved with graceful precision, placing the deer carving facing the door, the feathers pointing inward, the beads forming a neat ring around the small figure. Then she sat cross-legged and traced a pattern in the dirt with her fingertip, spirals, and lines intersecting like the map of a journey. Jack stared. "Right, well, you just make yourself at home." For the first time she smiled, calm, warm, almost triumphant. She stood, walked to him, and touched his arm gently. Not in gratitude, but in acknowledgement, as if he had just agreed to something he didn't yet understand. Jack felt a prickle run down his spine. Something told him this wasn't just a stranger resting in his cabin. Something was being set in motion. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting warm stripes across Jack's wooden floor. He blinked awake to the smell of food, real food cooking over the fire. For a moment, his sleep-fogged mind drifted to the thought that maybe some generous neighbor had shown up early. But neighbors didn't just stroll into his cabin. He sat up abruptly. Nayeli was standing by the hearth, her hair neatly braided, moving with calm purpose. She wore one of his shirts, his cleanest one, which hung on her like a dress. She stirred a pot with a wooden ladle, humming a soft melody that was older than the hills. Jack rubbed his eyes. "Morning. You feeling better, I guess?" She glanced back and gave him a serene smile. The kind that could either mean I'm grateful or everything is going exactly how I planned. Before Jack could ask what she was cooking or why she was wearing his clothes, a faint rumble drifted through the morning stillness. Hoofbeats. He froze. Ranger neighed outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of multiple riders approaching. Jack grabbed his revolver off the nightstand and moved to the door, every muscle tightening. When he stepped outside, his breath caught. 5 Apache warriors rode toward the cabin, moving in a calm but deliberate formation. Sunlight glinted off their beadwork and polished bone ornaments. At the head of the group rode a man with the confident bearing of a leader. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face stern but composed. The riders dismounted in near-perfect unison. Jack swallowed hard, keeping his tone steady. "Mornin'. If you're looking for the lady inside, I didn't mean any harm. She was in bad shape. Just helped her out is all." The leader took a few steps forward. His gaze was assessing but not hostile. "I am Taza," he said in accented but fluent English. "Nayeli's brother." Jack lowered the gun slightly. "Right, good. Maybe you can explain what's going on." Taza's stern expression transformed into something surprisingly warm, something like approval. "You have already accepted," he said proudly. "You carried her. You brought her to your home, and she prepared the sacred signs." Jack blinked. "Accepted what?" Taza spread his arms as if announcing a celebration. "The marriage ritual. Nayeli chose you." Jack's jaw dropped. "My marriage? Sir, I thought she was injured. I didn't—" Behind him, Nayeli stepped outside and gently slipped her hand into his. Taza nodded with deep satisfaction. "It is done." Evening settled over the desert like a soft blanket, cooling the heat-baked land until the air hummed with a quiet peace. The sky stretched wide and fiery above. Jack's cabin, swirls of orange melting into rose-pink and deepening purple. The kind of sky that made men pause and remember. They were small in the grand scheme of things. Jack sat on his porch steps, elbows on his knees, staring out at the shifting colors while his mind tumbled in. Circles, marriage, ritual, chosen. The words echoed in his head like canyon walls throwing back his own confusion. He tipped his hat forward, letting out a long sigh. "I just wanted to check my cattle," he muttered to himself. "One normal day. That's all I asked for." Inside the cabin, soft movements and the sound of beads clicking together drifted out through the open door. Nayeli emerged a moment later and approached him with silent, graceful steps. She carried a bundle of red yarn and small decorative charms, tiny shells, carved beads, slivers of polished stone. Without asking, she sat beside him. The porch dipped slightly under her weight, and she offered him a quiet smile that seemed to cut through all the day's chaos. Jack cleared his throat. "Listen, Nayeli, this ritual thing, I didn't realize. If I'd known, I probably would have fainted dead on the spot." She giggled, not mocking but genuine and warm. She took the brim of his hat gently, lifting it off and placing it in her lap. Then she began braiding the red yarn around the band, weaving in the small charms with careful fingers. Jack watched her work, bewildered and oddly comforted. "That right there? What's it mean?" She paused, meeting his eyes with a soft steadiness. "Union," she said. "Not forced, chosen." She placed a hand over her heart, then over his. It hit him like a slow dawning sunrise. She hadn't trapped him. She had trusted him. Jack exhaled, tension slowly draining from his shoulders. "Well," he said with a crooked smile, "I ain't ever been one for fancy ceremonies anyway." Nayeli rested her head lightly on his shoulder. The warmth of her presence wasn't demanding. It was grounding, steady, like she'd known for certain he'd be there beside her. As the first stars pricked through the twilight, Jack slid an arm around her, pulling her close. "Reckon this ain't the life I planned," he murmured, watching the desert glow fade into silver night. "But maybe it's the one I was riding toward all along." She squeezed his hand, and in the quiet desert evening, something new, something steady and hopeful began between them.